There we go. All right. So, for those that don't know, the namesake for which we are named of is Oscar Joe Bryant. Oscar Joe Bryant was a police officer that was killed on May 13th in 1968. At the time, he was believed to be the first African American LAPD officer killed in the line of duty. After he was killed, a group of officers got together and they decided to take a stance against racism and discrimination in September of that same year. And because of their bravery and his bravery, they decided to put the organization together and they named it after him. So that's where we get our name from, and that's a little bit of history about the Oscar Joe Bryant Foundation. Just to start off tonight, our webinar guidelines. Obviously, we want to be respectful to everyone. When you have questions or when you're making comments, be respectful. Please mute your microphones if you're not talking at the time. Questions will be taken via chat or live after the presentation. So if you have questions as we're going, you can put some questions in the chat room and we'll get to them as we go through. And then lastly, the webinar is meant to be informative and not a platform for debate. So please, make it as educational as possible. All right, so our distinguished guest this evening will be Director Elizabeth Rhodes. She is the director of the Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy. I always want to make sure I get that right. And then we have Assistant Inspector General Florence Yu of the Office of the Inspector General. She's in charge of the complaint section. We have Stacey Spell, who is in charge of media relations. And last but certainly not least, we have Captain Valencia Thomas, who is the captain in charge of internal affairs. So with that being said, let's talk about this policy. So on April 27th of this year, the department came out with this personal use of social media policy. And I think some people were aware of it. Obviously, it was something that was a presentation for the police commission, but I'm sure that not a lot of officers watch the police commission open sessions. So, and then obviously we all get this by email or e-learning, and then we just sign for it, and half the time we don't read what it actually is. So we being the Oscar Joe Bryant Foundation, wanted to make sure that our members, and not just our members, but other department employees as well, understand what this policy is about and how it can affect them. So with that being said, let's talk about it. What was the purpose of this policy? And Director Rhodes, if you could start and maybe give us a little history behind it.
Well, let me try. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here. Second of all, let me tell you that there is probably no one on the call that uses social media less than I do. So I will try not to embarrass myself, but I am sure to fail in that endeavor and embarrass myself by my lack of knowledge about social media. And third, before I get to the topic at hand, let me say that in 1968, when your founder or your namesake was killed, and then having a foundation formed by September is something that obviously could never happen today in the Los Angeles Police Department, because that's too short of a time period. So congratulations on that, I guess. Getting to the policy itself, the purpose really, although there are multiple points in it, and I know that you've got an outline of some of those points, but I think the overall point and the overall statement was that while everyone is entitled to a personal life and a private life, as police officers, and while this applies to civilians as well, the most visible portion of the department, the Los Angeles Police Department, is the sworn, which is easy for me to say because I'm not sworn. So there's a lot that rests on your shoulders. and that I say that with respect, but also with knowledge that you are the visible face of the Los Angeles Police Department. And social media, for everybody's desire to sort of keep it private, as its very name implies, is both social and media. So it is out there, and people post things on social media, not because they want to keep it, near and dear and right inside their heart, but because they are sharing. The policy and the core values of the Los Angeles Police Department require its officers to a certain standard, and that standard is both on and off duty, so that if you make remarks or comments or act in ways that would, bring disrespect on the department or make it more difficult for you to be a police officer in an incredibly diverse community, in a city that has all kinds of people that you are sworn to protect and to serve. And if it makes it more difficult for you to do that, then there's a problem, and there can be consequences and discipline for that. And there are real life consequences in addition to discipline that impact the department. One of your jobs, all of our jobs, is to take cases, to investigate crimes, to bring cases, to put them forward in court, and to basically make sure that justice is served. And the justice system, while not perfect, is one of the best in the world, and it allows defendants to have a right to confront their accuser. And that right, I think that there has been a belief in local police departments, including the Los Angeles Police Department, that they can't reach out, that the defendants can't, or defense counsel can't reach out and touch, officers, that you are able to testify without any personal information coming back at you. And that just really isn't the law. And the trend is towards more open discovery. And so, the purpose of this policy is to let everybody know that social media is sort of fair game. The department is not really looking to do gotchas, but it is fair game if something comes to the department's attention for both internal discipline and for external. If it gets discovered, it can be used essentially against you or against your case when you are testifying. And so that it's sort of a desire to let that be known to everybody.
Thank you.
Big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask Captain Thomas a quick question, because I know we did have a prior policy, but I don't think it was as descriptive. Can you kind of maybe talk about the differences between the two policies? She might be having a problem unmuting.
Can you hear me, Joni?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't believe there's much difference in the policies, other than this has simplified it and made it very clear what the expectations are of our employees. The implications that utilizing social media has on us. It impacts and influences various aspects of our lives. We oftentimes think that if our settings are private, then it's private and no one will ever know anything about it. But that's not true. So this new policy lets everyone know that the parameters that you think that you had in place that would protect you really doesn't, and lets you know how deep and how far, like Ms. Rhodes said, when you go to court, they can subpoena and get all of your information and your activity that you've had on social media. So we as police or department employees are held to a much higher standard. And this policy right here is very, very simple. I think it simplifies everything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now let's kind of get into it. All right. I think sometimes people don't sometimes really understand this, but I think this is important as well. Does this affect sworn and civilian members of the department and reserve officers? Captain Spell, you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, Jody, and thanks for having me here. And just wanted to tell everybody I'm extremely grateful and I'm honored that I'm able to share. I think the perspective on a lot of this is this is it's a way to keep our officers out of harm's way. I mean, we look at that tactically and how we do that physically, but this is one of the areas that I think a lot of folks can get in trouble with, and they don't necessarily recognize that the policy does affect sworn and civilian members of the department. It would affect reserve officers. I mean, if you have volunteers, it's a little bit different in terms of discipline because they're not subject to the same standards, but I mean, we could cease using them as volunteers. But in essence, any person that represents the department in any way, shape, or form is affected by this policy. And really, I think the idea is that if we give folks the tools, if they they look at this policy and they see that anything that creates a nexus, if there's use of any kind of identifiers that make this now kind of a shared platform with the department, then it's definitely it's subject to being viewed as anything that you would say in public.
Thanks for that clarification. And I wanted to make sure, when we put this out and advertise it, I wanted to make sure that we advertise it to everyone, because sometimes I think some of our employees, either whether it be sworn or civilian, they think, oh, well, that policy is not for us, it's just for sworn or it's just for civilians. And it's like, well, no, this one affects all of us. So I think it's important. And we have members that are sworn and civilians. So I wanted to make sure we could include them as well. But thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome.
All right. So getting into the policy, let's talk about what it entails. What does it include? It includes different internet-based services. So we're talking about Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, anything you can imagine, right? Even YouTube videos, for example. And I know you have captains and senior lead officers and even some other officers that have department approved internet accounts, right? Does this affect them as well? Would that affect them as well, Ms. Rhodes?
Yes. So, I think that, and I think Captain Thomas sort of touched on this a little bit. The problem, so, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was younger, that, they said, I use BREC, and then I told that is essentially what social media is. I know most of you on this call have no idea what that commercial was, but things get amplified on social media. That's why people on social media are called influencers, and it affects, it affects anyone who uses it in any capacity. And so there's a little bit of, if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? If you post something on social media and it's on a private setting and nobody sees it, A, I guess you're not an influencer, but B, if it's not found, like every crime or misconduct out there, it's not that everything is found. The problem is you just don't know. And if you tell one person, there's a risk that that person tells somebody If you tell two people, there's you double your risk. If you put it completely out there, you lose the ability to control that information. And so, yes, social, the policy does also impact those who have department authorized platforms or ability to communicate. And in fact, I guess those people should be even more forewarned. If you're communicating over an LAPD platform as an LAPD officer or civilian, and you say something that you have very little wiggle room to argue that this policy would not apply.
Thank you for that. That explains a lot. Captain Spell, I wanted to ask you a quick question. Being in charge of media relations, do you guys give any like guidebooks or anything to the department employees who have a actual department approved account, like an on-duty account, like a senior lead officer or a captain, if you will, or a chief? Do you guys give them like direction on what they should and should not say? Like, should they stay away from politics, or should they stay away from certain topics and things of that nature?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been asking folks to do is not only be familiar with the brand new policy as far as personal use, but there was also a 2018 policy that as far as official use, all of that is still pertinent. And then overall, there's a policy guide that was in 2015. So I know we've actually had some folks going out to roll calls and just having any kind of like formal settings. If there's a supervisors meeting, we've offered to go and attend those. But so we've gone and done kind of a circuit. And then I've had conversations with other command officers just about making sure that they adhere to those guidelines that are within what to do with official accounts. And really what it comes down to is ultimately, I mean, it's a form of outreach and communication, but we want to be cautious that whether it's official or even off duty, that what we're expressing is the same thing. If I said it in that in that forum, would I say the same thing in public? I mean, there's really no expectation of privacy when it comes to and I think we'll probably cover this later on, but as far as privacy settings, a number of other things, when somebody says something in public as part of an official account, it should be the voice of the department. Or if if it's in a division, we've had dialogues with captains and with senior lead officers and folks saying that really the content of the material should be purposeful. It should be something that, like, if there's a fatal traffic incident, collision, or there's an area that's impacted, do we want to inform the community? It should be based on that and not based on people's opinions or whatever other kind of things they want to put out there. They really should be the voice of the department.
That's a great point. Yeah. Our opinions should stay to ourselves, especially when we're on duty. I wanted to ask Ms. Yu and Captain Thomas a quick question for both of them, because I think sometimes people think that both of you have these secret squads that, hack into people's private accounts and monitor them. Could you guys kind of talk about that or dispel that rumor that, the IG's office or internal affairs, you guys have these secret hacker squads that hack into people's, private accounts and actually, look at what they're doing and things of that nature?
I don't think I want to dispel that rumor. I mean, doesn't everybody want to be omnipresent? We're the panopticon. We see all and capture all. No, the hacker squad is me. I am one of the youngest people in our office. So I am very well versed with the internet and social media and how to capture everything on the internet. So if we do receive a complaint about potential officer misconduct related to social media, as much as possible, my staff, they're trained to capture all that to make sure it goes to internal affairs. With respect to the ability to get into other people's social media accounts and hacking into them, it's not so much that we're able to do so, is that more often than not, folks aren't really good with their privacy settings. And, social media functions like an interesting game of telephone, in the sense that, one person calls someone else, well, not telephone. I don't actually know what the good analogy is, but in any event, people think it's private, but once you're a friend of somebody else or you're tagged somewhere else, someone who's a friend of that person can just easily open it, a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. So, you know, people send us information. We get it. We get all of it. It gets saved. And then we send all that to IA. Now, with respect to IA, if they have a super secret hacker squad, that's up to Captain Thomas to answer.
No, we do not have that.
Breaking up a little bit there. I don't know if anybody else can hear her. No. Oh, maybe we're losing connection. Maybe losing connection with you, Captain Thomas. It looks like she had the infamous frozen screen. So we'll move on and we'll get back to that question. But I think she said no, they don't have a hacker squad as well. So all right. Let's see here.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yes, I can.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, we do not. Just simplistically, no, we do not have a secret hacker squad. We don't have the staff to even do that. And as I said, I do not use social media. I use it very infrequently, just as little as I need to. And so I would not even be the person to run that kind of a unit. We get a lot of our information, as Ms. Yu said, from the IG's office. And I do have IOs that if we have an investigation that requires such, that they do have some of the skills to do that. But we do not, as a practice, monitor folks' social media websites.
Thanks for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think Captain Spell and Ms. Yu mentioned it as well. What if I have my settings on private, right? And so I have everything set to private, but maybe it comes to the attention of the department anyway. Maybe somebody takes a screenshot. Somebody that's a friend of mine, or like you said, a friend of a friend, sees a screenshot or sees something on my account, but I have my everything set to private. Am I still liable under this policy?
I mean, I guess a question you need to ask yourself is how private is it if someone else is able to capture that information and share it with someone else? Then by definition, that's not private. I know there's a discussion about whether or not a nexus to the department has to be established. And that's been a discussion back and forth amongst different groups about what it means to establish a nexus. If someone knows you're an officer and they file a complaint against you and says, hey, I know this person is an officer, and they said XYZ, and then they send it to IA, will a complaint be generated? Well, yes, a complaint will be generated because it's a public complaint. But whether or not the department determines as a nexus, that's a different question. Then I defer to Director Rhodes for that.
So I would go back to, you can think it's private, it's not. You can also think talking on your cell phone on a bus is private, that you're having a private conversation. It isn't. You can think that you can go to Starbucks and FaceTime your friend and nobody can hear it. Got news for you. Everybody can. They know your business. And so, you know, your intent about making it private is not really a relevant factor. Moreover, the nexus to the department in some cases is relevant, but again, even if I had a social media where I called myself, you know, Jennifer Aniston or something, and fancied myself some other person, if somebody knows that it's Liz Rhodes that is saying that and says, you know, Liz Rhodes said these terrible things on her social media, they have made that nexus. So the other thing that is discussed, frankly, is it a matter of, you know, a newsworthy type of post? And I will just let everyone just sort of think to themselves certain things that may be newsworthy and abhorrent to you personally. And there are those kinds of things. My advice to anybody out there would be, if you think it could be considered in any way harmful to the mission of the department, which, as I said, is service to all, or to any particular group that you are going to need to, help, aid. It's your sworn duty to assist. And if your post can be perceived as you being biased against the person that needs your aid, or for the person who may be committing some sort of misconduct or crime, then that is a problem. And so, your intent is less important than what is actually said and how it is interpreted.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. All right, so now let's get into what's prohibited. And this is just for everybody's general knowledge to understand. I'm not going to read that, but you can see that, yes, the department can take disciplinary action, which means anything up to and including removal from the department. So make sure everyone understands that. And, just like any other type of misconduct, this can be held against you as well. So understand it and read it and make sure that you know that all this stuff counts towards you. Let's talk about some of those things that are prohibited. So first thing we have is personal social media that undermines the reputation and mission of the department in providing services to the public. And then we have personal social media that compromises officer safety. What does it mean to undermine the reputation of the department, or the mission of the department? Would any of you like to chime in on that one?
Yeah, Jody, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I think, when we look at something that undermines the reputation and the mission of the department, part of the mission is that we're going to serve, a diverse, community of Angelenos, and that diversity oftentimes means that we have to make sure that there's no bias demonstrated in our actions when we're on the job, but also in your personal social media. If there's anything that gives up any kind or gives the perception of any kind of bias, that certainly undermines that inclusivity that we're looking for in the department. When we talk about things that just would normally probably be either unbecoming conduct or things that really don't align themselves with our core values, our mission statement. Those are exactly the kind of things that I think maybe people think that because it's off duty and it's in the social media setting, that's not going to be any more contrary to the core values or what we're trying to achieve than if they were on duty. But that's just not the case. I mean, regardless of where they're at, if it's something that doesn't align itself with what we're trying to accomplish, which is building trust and making ourselves approachable, and not demonstrating bias in our actions, then that's really what that's about.
Okay, I have a follow-up for Captain Thomas. So I want to give you an example. So I know that this has been a pretty hot topic, I think, internally in the department and even externally as well. But I know I've seen it and people have brought it to my attention from social media posts. Since Chief Moore has taken over, he has made it a mission of his and the department's to make our workforce more diverse, meaning he wanted to have more women and more African Americans and more Asian Pacific Islander officers. So that being said, if I go on social media and I go, oh, the department is just lowering their standards because they want to, hire more diversity, they want to hire more women and they have to lower their standards and blah, 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 blah. Would that be something that undermines the reputation of the department?
Well, it could. It could. If we had a community member that brings that to our attention and wants to make a complaint, as a result of that, we would take that complaint and we would investigate it. I think that's I think the beauty of this new policy it reminds us that we are held to a much higher standard, and everything that we say, whether it's on duty or off duty, can potentially impact us in our occupation, right? This is that kind of an occupation where whatever we do, whenever we do it, it can impact us. Unlike other occupations you can go have a DUI, call in sick for 3 days because you're in jail, and then go back to work and have to don't tell anybody anything, right? But not here. You know, it's totally different. Yeah, so we would look at the, we would investigate it surely, and look at the totality of it. Okay, yeah. And that goes, I think that goes in line with what Captain Spell was talking about, something that is contrary to what this department expects and what this department is moving towards trying to accomplish.
If I might, I would just add that your posts, it's not just the public. We need to work as a cohesive unit. So, for example, if Captain Spell were to post, he thinks that, you know, using your example, and I'll try to make it to me, you know, that women lawyers are not nearly as good, and you know, we've really lowered our standards now by having a director of OCPP who is a female. That would create conflict within, or certainly could create conflict within our own department, and that makes us a less effective department overall. And those kinds of comments, even if the public doesn't hear them or report them, that it would also be something that impacts, you know, our community and our workforce. And the policy is also to make sure that our workforce works as efficiently as possible.
Thank you for that. Yes, that helped a lot, and I think hopefully everybody understands that one, because I want to, obviously it's the first one on in the policy, and I think it's important. But it you know, it goes to what, you know, what they need to understand in regards to, you know, if this does come to light and they're being investigated, what will the department be looking at, and how are they looking at certain things. I think the next one, social media that compromises officer safety, that's pretty explanatory. I know I had a situation, the person is no longer an officer, so I can talk about it, but it was an officer who was a motor officer, and he had a tendency of posting different interactions he had with citizens on social media. And he would even, like, to the point of posting the citation, but he would redact like their information. And so I, you know, had to tell him, I sent him a private message. I said, hey, dude, you can't do that. And this was years ago. I was like, that's not something that you should be doing, because, you know, even though, you know, you were, you know, you had a lawful right to give them a ticket and all that, now you're putting their information on social media, and, you know, and obviously you're putting official department documents on social media and things of that nature. And so he understood, and he quickly took it down and didn't do it anymore. And like I said, he's no longer a member of the department, but maybe that's a good thing. But he, to me, that was like a good example of one of the things, like we shouldn't be posting official documents and things of that nature on there. Do you have something?
If I'm, yeah, if I may add, you know, for officers, I think a crime fighting tool that they use is that they use social media to locate certain suspects, either through their geolocation, or some suspects aren't very bright and they post where they're at and they show photos of them holding guns, right? Officers use social media to investigate crimes. Suspects could also use social media to track down where officers are if they're posting constantly posts, and they forget to turn off geolocation settings. Now, as an officer, you put you and your officer in danger by identifying where you are. Not only are you putting yourself in danger, you might be compromising an investigation unknowingly. I don't know how many folks know how to turn off the geolocation on all the photos they take. other things on, if you've already identified yourself as an officer in social media, it's not just your safety. If you take photos with your family, your friends, if there are people out there who have it out for you, then it's dangerous. So this part of the policy I really appreciate, because I think it's important to recognize that we all worry about officer safety, and sort of why, in my viewpoint, social media is not something, personal use of social media is something that we should all be very, very careful about how we use it and what we post. But if you haven't already turned off your geotagging or geolocation on your photos and your posts, definitely figure out your settings and do it sooner rather than later. This is something that the FBI actually had in their social media policy a long time ago. And our office is very, very glad to see that it was incorporated into the department's new social media policy.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, because I think it mentions it in the policy about, and you mentioned it as well, tagging, say, your partner or something in a photo that you put on social media. Because if I don't have social media, and say my buddy Rashad Sharif does, and he posts a picture of all of us, and then he tags my name in there, but I don't have social media, and now everybody can see who I am, and maybe I didn't want people to know that I was a law enforcement officer or something of that nature. Those types of things also are things that could compromise officer safety. So those are things that we all need to be cognizant of. All right, let's move on to the next three. So personal social media that uses department trademarks and insignia. So I had a question about that. So let's see, Captain Thomas, if I am at a promotional ceremony and I'm in uniform, and we're all in uniform and we're in front of LAPD headquarters, and we take pictures and we post it on social media, is that a violation of policy?
What I think the department is going to be looking at is the content of that photo. It is a department function, and that does not bring discredit to this organization, right? So, but what will happen though is that now you have all that on your social media website. So now everybody knows who you are, what you are, right? And also the other folks that's in that photograph. So those are things that we've got to pay attention to, and every post that you make after that, or even before that, can be scrutinized. Okay. So being very careful with the social media websites is very, very crucial.
Thank you for that. And Captain Spell, so let me ask you a question. If on my personal website, I have an LAPD badge, or maybe my badge, with my badge number on it, it kind of has my insignia for my personal social media account. Is just that in itself, would that be a violation of this policy? You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Jody. Yeah, I wouldn't say that in and of itself is a violation of policy, but what I would caution is that if it was intended for personal use, now you've just increased, that nexus to the department, and because now if you have that badge on there, I mean, then you are really speaking more. I mean, it's more of like an official account, an account that could be scrutinized. Because you're representing the department by using the badge. So, I mean, the recommendation would be is that if you really want it to be, private, then you don't use anything, any kind of logos, words, even symbols that are going to be directly connected back to the department.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Ms. Rose, you have something?
Yeah, sorry. I don't mean to interject too much. So I'll try to. So some as hard as this may be to for people to believe, some people will use their position as a police officer with the LAPD to endorse or sell other type products, or just, you know, say certain things are good that they may not even be something the department doesn't want or doesn't believe in, but the department doesn't endorse that particular thing. Or people may use their social media account and their position as an officer to make money off challenge coins for their own personal benefit. And so those are some of the things, if you are using your position in social media or in any way, you know, that is benefiting you and is not really authorized by the department, then that can be problematic.
Thank you for that. That leads to one of my examples I was gonna bring up. I wanted to ask if, I mean, I know I'm not on any of them, but I know that a lot of our younger officers are, maybe some of our older officers are as well, on a lot of these dating apps or dating websites. If I'm in uniform, or if I have some type of, you know, insignia or logo on this dating app that says, "Hey, I'm LAPD" or whatever, is that something that could get me in trouble?
So from my perspective, dating apps are sort of a problem in general. And I would just say that as a person who sits in IA signing. But so again, I think that goes back to Captain Spell's point, which is any privacy that you want to have, you are really breaking down any barrier for that. And so I'm not sure it's against the I wouldn't say the letter of the policy, but in terms of, you know, for your foundation, for the group, it is for the reasons that Ms. Yu has talked about and Captain Spell, it's not advisable.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great way of putting it. All right, let's move on to the next one. Social media that breaches confidentiality. I know there's, I believe there's new California law about that, correct? That was based off of the death of Kobe Bryant. I forget the exact law, but I know there's a state law, I believe, that kind of talks about that confidentiality and breaches of confidentiality for obviously victims of crimes or victims of certain things, but also that would be internally, right? Like what I mentioned about the officer that was putting the citations on social media. Would that be something that would be similar to that as well?
Yeah. Again, so this portion of the policy was actually put in because of the Kobe Bryant law, and I have to just say, thank goodness it wasn't us that took those pictures. But you know, I guess there are people out there that think crime scenes are kind of a turn on, and police work in general. And so it's just another thing to be cautious about. We, especially the sworn, need to make sure that, you know, they're serving the community, including the privacy interests of the community. And while we sort of started this webinar or meeting indicating that you don't really have a lot of privacy, especially when it comes to social media, you should, you know, you need to use as much tact and deference when dealing with people, and remembering that, you know, when you're investigating some of these heinous crimes, you are clear, or not even heinous crimes, you are dealing with people on one of the worst days that they are having. And there's, you know, you do need to maintain their confidentiality because they didn't unlike you, they didn't really sign up for that.
Absolutely. And I just found it, actually it's in the policy, it's actually Penal Code Section 647.9. So those of you that might be wanting to know what that section is and you want to look it up for later, 647.9 of the Penal Code Section, invasion of privacy for first responders. All right, and I think lastly, when we talk about things that are prohibited, social media representing the department. Captain Thomas, would you like to talk about that one? What does that mean?
Well, the policy is pretty clear. It talks about representing, speaking on behalf of the department. We don't get to do that. And this is something that we learned when we were in the academy, keeping your personal opinion to yourself, not talking about religion, politics and your opinions. That's what you cannot do. And the department expects for you not to do that, right? And then, so on your social media, if you're in uniform, as an example, and you start talking about the debates and your opinions, let's just say, you are then could be perceived as speaking on behalf of this organization. So those are things that they want us to be mindful of.
Great, thank you for that. I think that really explains it. And like you said, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It says shall not represent or imply they are speaking on behalf of the department. So that's pretty cut and dry, right?
Yes.
I'd like to add that it actually isn't that cut and dry, right? There are some folks who, without department approval, have put LAPD in front of their name and they've put it up there in social media. It's not a department approved account, but they decide to use LAPD and they're speaking on this platform. And in the last couple of years, our office has seen an increase in a number of discussions, whether they're public discussions, personal opinions, or whatnot, it's going on. Is that considered representing the department once you put LAPD on your handle, even though it's not a department approved account? Captain Thomas or Director Rhodes?
It could be, because that's where it talks about the perceived, that it's perceived that you are speaking on behalf of this organization. When you represent yourself as LAPD in any manner and you begin to speak on whatever topic, that's what you're doing. That's what you potentially are perceived as doing. Let's put it that way.
So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in some ways, when we think about the department, there's a pretty strict hierarchy that people know about. When you talk to people outside of the department, a person in the academy is an authority figure. A police officer is an authority figure. And so as soon as you put LAPD, regardless of where in the hierarchical rank structure you are representing the department. As Captain Thomas says, the perception of most people is that you are speaking on behalf of the department, and that can become very troublesome.
And if you don't mind, if I can chime in, and I would add, I mean, like we see this kind of thing where somebody says, hey, we want to do a podcast or something like that, and we want LAPD Sergeant, Joe Friday, to be the host, or to do this, that, or the other, or whatever. And we've had to tell people, like, in terms of, there's actually like trademark agreements that are governed by the city attorney, and that kind of say, what can be used and what can't be used. And we'll have to tell people to say, well, no, if they're not actually representing the department, they can say they're a sergeant with a large metropolitan, municipal police department in Southern California, but they can't say that they are LAPD, because if they do that, then that is going to not only infer, but really kind of put out there that they're representing the department. So people just have to really be cautious with that.
Thank you. That was a really good example. I think that really helped. All right. Now this one may take a little bit more explaining, and I think that those that are maybe following along with the policy, or if you've noticed in the policy under the that last bullet point of representing the department, it has a note and it talks about this case, Moser versus Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Director Rose, would you like to kind of talk about this one a little bit?
So let me try and do this without without letting my personal opinions come through. So this is a case in which a police officer was killed, and then the SWAT team in Las Vegas, which I know they don't really have SWAT, only we are SWAT, people copy us, but then took out the guy who had killed the police officer. And the SWAT officer indicated on social media that it was too bad that the guy didn't end up with more holes in his body, or with more holes or something like that. And the district, so it was a federal case, the district court said, yes, that was problematic, and he was talking as a member of his job. The league believes that the circuit in overturning that made some sort of ex post facto rulings that you couldn't go back in time. The opinion of the Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy is that it was the ruling of the circuit court, which is the Ninth Circuit. We are also in the Ninth Circuit. So the state of Nevada and the state of California and others are all in the Ninth Circuit, was that it presented a triable issue of fact. So judges can determine the law. If it's truly an issue of law, then a judge could determine it. But as long as there's a triable issue of fact, then it should go to a jury. And the circuit court determined that it was unclear whether the officer's statements were just hyperbolic rhetoric, or whether he really was indicating, as the district court felt, that he wanted to, that he was advocating for violence against anyone who would harm the police. So the court ruling is much narrower, because it just said that the circuit court just said, no, it's going back to the district court for trial or some sort of fact finding, rather than just a legal finding. But there was dicta in the case, which is non-controlling language that talked about not going back. And so it's a little confusing, but for purposes of, and I've probably made it more confusing, I apologize. But for purposes of the policy, the policy sort of moves forward in time. And so if you were somehow unaware that what you did on April 26, 2021, the day before the policy came out, the policy impacts you from there forward.
Got it. I think I got it. Now, I wanted to ask this question of you and Ms. Yu, being that both of you are lawyers, and hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot, but when I was reading, actually, I read last night, I was kind of doing some homework and I read that actual case. And one thing that kept being brought up was the Pickering balance test. Can either of you speak on what that actually is? Or should I just tell people to look it up?
You should have told me to do my homework last night.
Yeah. I believe it's a three-pronged test, and you have to balance the interests of the officer's personal right to speak, the interests of the agency, and whether or not it is a matter of public interest to what you're speaking about. For example, if an officer identifies him or herself as an officer and comments about, for example, a low salary, and it affects not only himself, but the agency, and it's a matter of public concern, that's fine. However, if it's a personal opinion, that may negatively interfere with the department. It has nothing to do with the administration of the agency, but more so a differing viewpoint, and they want to represent the department differently, then that balancing test changes. I read this case maybe a year ago, so I could be wrong. So back to you, Director Rhodes.
I actually think that's right. And this is the area that I was talking about, sort of politics and what gets in, if it's a matter of general public concern, that's different than if it's a matter of private concern. I think it is pretty clear that right now we are in a very fractured climate in the United States, sort of politically. And so some things that seem racist, sexist, anti-democracy, et cetera, are all within this sort of public concern or public arena. And that's where it gets really sticky. I would, again, that's sort of an area for debate. But if I were advising a group of individuals about how to be sort of safe from any issues that, getting in trouble with the policy or getting in trouble sort of in court when testifying, I would advise you to stay far away from that line rather than try to figure out how the balancing test is going to come out in that.
I think that's very good advice. Very good advice. All right. I wanted to ask Captain Thomas one last question on that. So with all that being said, as an officer, are my First Amendment rights protected, or do I have the freedom of speech? Can I just say what I want to say when I want to say it? I am a citizen, right? I'm not LAPD 24/7. So as soon as I take that badge off, can I just say what I want to say?
You absolutely have a right to First Amendment, right? But you are a police officer on duty and off duty. There are expectations of you, and you have to be mindful of that. Everything you say and do can be scrutinized. So if you always, as Director Rhodes says, stay away from from those areas that may be controversial, you should be okay. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think you did. I'm sorry. Yeah, you did. I think so. And I wanted to make sure, because that's always, the debate or the rebuttal that officers have, right? As, well, what about my First Amendment rights, my rights to freedom of speech? And I think it's important that they understand that, it's when you're a police officer, it's limited.
Absolutely. 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 And that's, we talk about our core values and our mission statements and all of that. It talks about on duty, off duty, keeping your private life, all of that. Just because you're not donning the badge and the uniform every day, you are a Los Angeles police officer. Right. And there are expectations of you, and everything that you say can be utilized, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ms. Yu, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I really like the question that people ask. First Amendment rights, aren't they absolute? Don't I have the right to speak? We all have civil rights. They're all limited. You have the right to speak, but afterwards you have the right, the agency or whatever employer you're working for also has the ability to punish you depending on what the speech is, so long as it's viewpoint neutral and content neutral. So, caveat, like, we have all these rights, but the law is pretty clear that they're not absolute. So I echo what Captain Thomas and what Director Rhodes said, is that you want to err on the side of caution if you want to avoid potential allegations of misconduct against you.
Thank you for that. I think that was great. That is it. Well, yeah, I'm right on time. Perfect. I'm right in our time frame. So that was pretty much all we had for the presentation. Now I wanted to open it up for questions to our audience. Anyone who has a question, if you could, raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you, or if you can put your question in the chat room and then I'll read the question out to our panel and see if they can answer those questions, which I'm sure they can. Anyone? Nobody has questions, or they were that good? I know they were that good. Okay, there you go, Rashad. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Rashad. Go ahead, unmute yourself. You're still muted. There you go.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Rashad Sharif. I just wanted to say, do we have something? So back in the days, you know, you have a bad day and you and your partner would go to the bar and you just vent, and the young guys don't do that or don't have that. So what advice, because a lot of these social media things, these guys are just, I can't believe it. You know, I had this guy dead to rights and the DA let him go and they won't file the case and they pissed off, and this is how they vent. This is how they say it. They get on social media. And then, you know, they may end up getting a complaint investigation over that. So does anyone have advice or something that we can tell to get these guys, hey, don't do it in the public, and what you think is social media and you and your friends is not just that. It's, you know, it's bigger than that. More people have eyes on. So I was just trying to think of something that we can, you know, talk to the younger officers.
I think as someone who's part of that generation of the younger crowd and understanding the desire to post everything on social media, I gotta say, we gotta go old school. Pick up the phone and do a conference call. Pick up the phone, call each other. Can't hurt to hear someone else's voice, because what's posted anywhere on the internet, on your phone, anyone can screenshot it. The internet is forever. So in order to protect yourself and your friends, it is better just to pick up the phone.
Great
They
advice.
could make friends with really old people.
Right. Thank you. That was good. Thank you.
Call your parents or your grandparents or something, right? And vent to them.
But you know what, Jody, there's also FaceTime, Google Duo. I mean, all of these, what we're doing now, Zoom, if they want to incorporate this social media aspect, you know, they can do that as well.
That's great advice, Captain. Thank you for that one. Oh, we got a question. So I think Lisa asked, where's the policy located on the land? Well, at least where I found it, because I knew what date it was. If you go under publications on the right side of the land and look under the date, which was April 27th, if you look under April, it has the title of the policy there, and you can click on it and pull it up and then download it from there. That's where I found it at, because I knew what date it was. But other than that, there's also a couple of little search engines on the land that you're able to use as well. All right, let's see. While we wait for any more questions, I don't see any hands. I had a question. So, Captain Thomas, what happens when IA is made aware of this? So say if you get a anonymous complaint, or say someone calls in and says, hey, you know, Jody Steiger said something that I didn't like, and here's a screenshot of what he said on social media. What happens then? Is it any different from any other type of internal affairs investigation? Or is it very similar to everything else?
Yeah, I mean, an investigation is an investigation, essentially. So it's similar. Maybe the manner in which we do it, because it involves social media, that may be the difference. But we would begin with looking at that screenshot, right? And go from there.
Okay, good. And that's good to know. I want to make sure everybody understood that. It's no different than any other type of investigation. This next question I have would be for Ms. Yu. So if which this probably doesn't happen, because I know Captain Thomas runs a tight ship over there in internal affairs. Say I'm not, you know, I'm not happy with the way that the outcome of the investigation, right? So say they investigated Jody Steiger for misconduct and it came out and I think, oh, you know what, they're biased against me because, you know, I like to wear blue shirts or something like that. And is there anything that the Inspector General's office can do to help me with that?
Anybody who's disappointed with the outcome of an investigation can call our office to request what's called a case review. We will then request the case from Internal Affairs, review it, and determine whether or not the investigation was done thoroughly. If it's within statute, there may be time to kick it back to IA to have some questions answered. If it's out of statute, there really isn't much to do other than for us to review the investigation to say this was done well or it wasn't done well. If it wasn't done well, why, and send it back to IA for training. What we don't do is release any information about the investigation, discuss the investigation, or what we do with the investigation. We will review it and check it for thoroughness, but we don't release any information. I mean, and if you're the accused employee and it was sustained or not if it was sustained against you, you'd probably get a copy of it anyway, so you already know what's in it. But we have complainants who call and you know, they're dissatisfied with the investigation and they want a second look, and we'll take a second look. And over a long term, if we receive enough complaints about the quality of investigation, the outcome, and we identify, yeah, indeed, there are issues with a lot of these investigations where we think IA can improve, we may do a public report and report this to the commission and hopefully spur some policy changes. But that's generally what our role is.
Thank you for that. All right. Anyone else have any questions for our panel before we sign off this evening? In the words of one of my favorite movies, anyone? Bueller? Well, it looks like there's no more questions. I just want to thank our panel. I want to thank all of you for participating. I think this was very educating and very much needed because a lot of the times, and I'm sure all of you would agree to this, the department puts out a policy and says, okay, hey, here's a policy, sign for it, and now you're accountable for it. And we really don't have any discussions about it. Or if I'm a watch commander, you know, I might get it and say, okay, this new policy came out. I really don't know much about it, but, you know, make sure you guys adhere to it because otherwise you're going to be held accountable for it. So I think it's important for us to have discussions with those that are very much more educated about it to help us understand, you know, how it can be, how we're held accountable to it and how it can affect all of us. So thank you all for participating in this panel this evening. And with that being said, have a great Friday and a great weekend. Thank you all.
Thank you.